Well, I learned a lot in the process of being chairman of the Lancet COVID-19 Commission. So when I was asked, I have a fair amount of experience in public health. I helped to organize originally the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, TB, and Malaria, and had chaired a commission for WHO and had worked on epidemic diseases. So I was very familiar with the community, and I was friends with Fauci, by the way, going back to 2001. I wrote him a memo why we needed a plan that eventually became PEPFAR, even with the number that I gave right at the beginning that we need a $3 billion a year plan. And I went to brief him and Condi Rice and so forth in the first weeks of the Bush administration. So, okay, I was very honored to take on the assignment of chair of the commission. And I listened around and I thought, well, the scientists have said in an article in Nature Medicine in March 2020 that this was natural. Basically, they said irrefutably so, essentially. And I thought that was plausible because that's what pandemics are. They are zoonoses. That means they go from animals to humans, and that's what SARS was, and on and on. So I actually I hired the guy. It's absolutely fascinating. I didn't hire him. There was no money involved, but I asked Peter Daszak of EcoHealth Alliance, which is in the center of the
the villain of the COVID pandemic for a lot of people.
I said, Peter, why don't you be chair of our task force, not of the commission, but of the task force working on the origin of this virus? Because you know a lot about it. You know what's going on in China. You know about bat viruses and so forth. Okay, that's stepping into it. So I did. I stepped into it, and we started. And I started to get a bit of hate mail towards the end of 2020, which is not so unusual. But, you know, Sachs, why did you put this guy in? And a Republican congressman, this is disgraceful. And I wrote back saying, look, I'm completely open-minded. I've given the assignment to them, find out the truth of what this is. And if it's from a lab, and if it's possible, we're going to track that down. And believe me, he doesn't make the judgment. There are 28 commissioners. I'm in charge of this and so forth. Okay, so you start seeing, because of the relentless work of this organization you started, The Intercept and U.S. Right to Know, we start getting strange things coming out, which is, but it took a long time just to get those first FOIAs coming out. And things start dropping that are a little weird. And then I got a wonderful briefing by a top scientist who explained to me, Jeff, it's, it's not what is being said. Let me explain to you the research that was going on. And I was like, oh my God. You know, he explained gain-of-function research to me for the first time in 2 or 3 hours of pretty detailed technical work. And he said, go read the NIH proposals. So I went online afterwards and I read that aim one is to test these chimeric viruses in the following way. And, oh shit, I got to figure out what's going on. So I went to Daszak the next day and I said, Peter, I need to see your full research proposal. And his line to me was, no, my lawyers say I can't share that with you. I said, are you kidding? We're in a commission that is a transparent public commission. No, my lawyer said
the most significant pandemic in almost a century.
So I said you're off you're off the task force. Forget it. We're not going to have that. But all of that's a long way to say things started to be peeled back in a most remarkable way. I give huge credit to The Intercept and to U.S. Right to Know, and to a whistleblower who posted the decisive document, which is the DARPA Diffuse research proposal that was posted by a whistleblower that is almost a cookbook, how to make a SARS-CoV-2 virus. Well, this became rather a fascinating fascinating thing, because the more we knew, the more we could see that what those scientists had written was phony. That's first of all. Second, that Fauci had been lying. That was absolutely clear. And third, I have to correct you, Glenn, it wasn't 3 weeks, it was 3 days after the February 1 conference call where they said, I can't figure out how this could have come out of nature.
Right.
3 days later, that they have the first draft of a paper that's called Proximal Origins of SARS-CoV-2, which is the one that says it's definitely natural. And you know what?
And then anyone who thinks otherwise is a malicious disinformation agent and conspiracy theorist.
Right. And by the way, so the bottom line, this is a long story. It's absolutely fascinating. But the bottom line is the following. First, there's a weird part of this virus called a furin cleavage site. It's 4 amino acids, which make the virus highly infectious and deadly. Second, that was a target of known research. Third, it was the target of the DARPA Diffuse project. Fourth, it was a major target of University of North Carolina in partnership with the Wuhan Institute of Virology. It's obvious there's something to explain here. Maybe it's a weird coincidence. Maybe, and I think more than likely, it's part of the research gone awry. But not only did Fauci hide this, and also the public, as usual, didn't learn that already in the spring of 2020, the Department of Energy, because it's Lawrence Livermore Laboratory, and Department of Energy was one, and another.
The FBI
had already found that there was a good chance that this was coming out of a lab, and
right.
no one was telling us anything. I'm getting a bad echo right now, Glenn.
Oh, we're gonna try and fix that right now. Yeah, so they're going to work that, but I just want to say, go ahead. Go ahead. You finish your answer. You finish first.
Just to give you the bottom line, to this day, no Democrat in Congress will touch this. It's the weirdest thing. The Republicans say we need to investigate. I was just with Senator Rand Paul. He's done a great job of saying we need to find out what this is. He can't get Democrats on this because protecting Fauci or protecting Biden, I don't know what they think they're doing. How the heck did the origin of SARS-CoV-2 become a partisan issue? That is so weird, so strange, so unpleasant. And yet that's how our politics has basically disintegrated.
It's bizarre. Even totally, what should be totally apolitical questions, like a scientific question about the origin of the most significant pandemic in 100 years, whether we played a role with good intentions or otherwise in causing it to happen, is something that has just become completely polarized along left, right, or Democratic versus Republican lines. And I just want to emphasize, for me, the most amazing thing about all of this wasn't so much that there were key facts the government knew that we subsequently discovered. And I've become a big critic of The Intercept, and I do think they deserve credit there. My hypothesis is that they did that FOIA request with the expectation that it would debunk a lot of the claims about EcoHealth and Peter Daszak, and they got this material and it did the opposite. And, to their credit, they published what they got. Good for them, but it was the most valuable contribution to understanding this. It wasn't just that this information was kept hidden. People were banned by big tech policy from questioning Fauci's narrative about the origins of the COVID pandemic until the Biden administration itself came out and said, you know what, we also are uncertain about this and we're going to investigate. And only then did Facebook and then Twitter and Google say we're now going to permit a discussion of this. It wasn't just that the government hid information, they prohibited any questioning of it on our primary means of communication. All right, let me ask you, to conclude what I now officially consider to be part one of our interview and our discussion. But I do want to give you this chance to talk about this because it's something, you and I had the chance to discuss. I then went after our discussion and read a bunch of stuff and found where this is coming from, and it is not obscure sites. But as I said, the New York Times, I think the headline of the profile about you that I quoted was something like the Dr. Shock Doctrine or something like that, or, you know, the idea that you were this leading ideologue of neoliberal cruelties, that you took distressed economies and forced the majority of the population to suffer for the benefit of the elites of those societies and international capital, that you are the avatar of neoliberalism and cruel disaster capitalism. And the shock doctrine is something so embedded in so many narratives. We had an opportunity to talk about why you regard that as a misperception. So I don't necessarily want you to walk through the whole history just for the sake of time, but I do want to give you a chance, since I have trifled with this belief in the past, something I absorbed uncritically, to go ahead and address why you think that's an unfair assessment.
It's not just unfair, it's completely silly. Completely silly. I wanted to read something that I said in September 1989
in the New Yorker interview.
Interview with New Yorker. I don't know if you saw that.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, I said, look, I'm no particular fan of Milton Friedman's or Margaret Thatcher's or Ronald Reagan's version of the free market. In the United States terms, I'd be identified as a liberal Democrat, and the country I admire the most is Sweden. Okay, I was a social democrat from a kid, a social democrat. So this whole idea of, now, the main thing I was trying to do and succeeded in doing with Poland and completely failed with Russia was to try to get some financial help to a country in crisis. Because as we discussed, I had imbibed what I really regard as a wonderful and correct view, and I practiced it in my career successfully, a view of John Maynard Keynes in 1919 and the economic consequences of the peace, where he basically says, be nice to the country that's in distress, because otherwise you can really get harm. And of course, Keynes wrote that book in protest of the Versailles Treaty and said the way that the Versailles Treaty is going to squeeze Germany is going to lead to the rise of horrors in the next generation unless we do something different. Very prophetic, and I took it very deeply, and that's why even in my first outing as an economic advisor, my main pitch was cancel Bolivia's debts because it's in hyperinflation. Stop squeezing this impoverished country. That's how I came to be an advisor to Poland, because they said, oh, can you help us with our debts? And I said, absolutely, I can. And I said to the White House, cancel Poland's debts. And lo and behold, they said, yes, absolutely. And I thought, God, I'm really so clever. You know, they followed just what I said.
And then on to Russia.
And then on to Russia. And I said, okay, we see how it works. Cancel Russia's debts. Hell no. Are you crazy? And so I didn't understand. I said, I gave good advice. I showed, you stabilize, you restore economic growth, but with Russia, nothing that I said was accepted. It had nothing to do with shock this and privatize. I wasn't even part of that stuff. I was trying to mobilize a debt standstill, which means you stop paying because you ran out of money, and permanent relief, and an emergency ruble stabilization fund, and finance for even, I think in that New York Times article, for healthcare. That's where I was spending my time on. We got to make sure the clinics are functioning. So everything that was said afterwards is so weird. But, one that pinned it on me was actually the Clinton administration, which did nothing. And then Strobe Talbot, in his clever line, said, too much shock, no therapy. And you know what? God damn it, he gave no therapy. He was in the government. I was pounding them, do some therapy, help. And they were doing absolutely nothing. And by the way, I just printed out in November 1991. This is before there's independent Russia. I said, now the Cold War and the collapse of communism have left Russia as a prostrate, frightened, and unstable, as was Germany, after World War I and World War II. Inside Russia, Western aid would have the galvanizing psychological and political effect that the Marshall Plan had for Western Europe. Russia's psyche has been tormented by 1,000 years of brutal invasions, stretching from Genghis Khan to Napoleon and Hitler. I was pressing, that was my job, was to try to help get some relief. And this got weirdly conflated with all sorts of things, but the opposite of what I believed, completely the opposite. And I quit early on, as I told you, in the end of 1993, because I was having no benefit from, I could not get the United States to do anything. Neither the Bush administration nor the Clinton administration. They were, because already the neocons were in full sway, but I had no idea.
And wanted a weak Russia, and wanted a weak, crippled Russia to expand further.
Let me read
Go ahead.
Yeah, let me read you what I wrote in 2014 in BBC. NATO's continued desire, expressed again just recently, to add Ukraine to its membership, thereby putting NATO right up on the Russian border, must be regarded as profoundly unwise and provocative. And then I said, in 1914, 1989, 2014, we live in the spread of NATO and by U.S. bullying since 1991. Come on, this has been my position all along. You help a country in distress or you face consequences, but this country became nastier and nastier in its politics because our domestic political system went completely plutocratic and our foreign policy went completely hegemonic. And this is a disaster for us. This is where we are today. We have a plutocracy at home, and we have a wannabe hegemonic rule abroad. Of course, it's so anachronistic. The whole world, other than a small part of the world, which is the European Union, UK, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Korea, and Singapore. Those are the only ones on our side. All the rest of the world is saying, stop, we don't want a hegemon. We want normal cooperation. But we've lost it in this country because the politics are so damn corrupt at home, all driven by money, including the military-industrial complex, which is a major lobby pushing for NATO enlargement, NATO weaponry, everything. And then abroad, the Newland administration foreign policy, which is expand everywhere and overthrow governments that don't like where you want to expand.
It is remarkable just how the continuity of these policies, while we keep hearing these elections are the most important in our lifetime, the parties are so radically different they can't agree on anything, and yet there is this remarkable continuity, and that's the first thing I observed when I started writing about the Bush and Cheney administration, and I was moved by President Obama's passionate vow to uproot it all, and then I watched him not only uproot none of it, but expand and enlarge virtually all of it, and that was my sort of coming of age lesson. I really want to thank you.
I could tell you, Glenn, my wife and I love a biography, a documentary of Gore Vidal that was filmed towards the end of his life. And he's sitting in his villa in Italy on the night of Obama's election. And they announce on the screen Obama's won. And the cameras go up to Gore Vidal. Aren't you excited? And he's completely, no, I'm not excited. Why aren't you excited? He says, because by the time you've gotten to be president, you've sold your soul so many times, it makes no difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, he was somebody who, used to be enamored of Democratic Party politics, a friend of the Kennedys and the like, and then he finally saw enough, and he became a super interesting figure by the end of his life. Again, thank you so much. This was definitely as enlightening as I expected and knew it would be. I'm very much looking forward to at least part 2, and we'll see how much we get through the other questions I had and the topics I wanted to discuss. But I really appreciate your time, and I hope to see you again shortly.
Hey, phenomenal. I'm going to hold you to part 2 because it's a lot of fun, and I'm learning a lot from you, so it's great.
Mutually. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.